Oh, hey guys, how are you? Hey, Damon, happy Monday, dude. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are things today?
Oh, just dandy. How was your weekend?
Oh, incredible.
Just
It's summertime weather, man. You
summertime
can't beat
weather
it.
in Seattle. Summer in Seattle, right? Like it's like being
Yeah.
sleepless in Seattle. Come on.
Yeah.
Nicole Donnelly, happy Monday. I know like you have a special glow. It was like, did you do something this weekend or what's happening here?
Got the afterglow. I took my 13-year-old daughter to her first concert and we went and saw Ed Sheeran, floor seats.
Wow.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah,
It was
nice.
amazing.
Just
Yeah.
drop the mic. Just moment of silence right
Yeah.
there. Just singing that. We should have opened up with an Ed song, you know?
Yeah. I'm
Oh,
just gonna pull
we're
something
gonna-
up just to
yeah,
bring it back.
Damon
me
might.
too.
So, hey, let's dig in. We have a ton to cover today, and this is a really, man, this is a special episode because, when you have a friend that's pre-COVID, like pre-COVID's like, like in dog years, it's like, decades ago. So this fine young man is a friend that goes pre-COVID, Ben Baker from Vancouver, Canada. How are you, my friend?
Well, I love the fact that you called me young. That's the first thing. Is the fact that you called me young. You and I are best friends for life, Kurt.
Dude, you are like tons younger than I am. I think I've got you beat by like 11 months or something like that. So
at least 11 months.
You're a baby compared to me. So,
well, Nicole's a baby in the group, but that's a different story altogether.
But she's the only mature one on the stage here. So, but that's
there is that
another story.
Yeah.
So,
Age
Ben
doesn't mean
Baker,
maturity.
so-
Good point.
Hey, Ben, thank you for joining us. This is way, way, way long overdue. Shame on me. So thank you for joining us. I have a ton to go over. We're going to dig into podcasting. And boy, podcasting is just anywhere. It is everywhere. I'm a podcast junkie myself. And I've learned a ton from you. And as a matter of fact, you and I connected through a podcast. Yeah. So I think this was like 5, I don't know, however many years ago.
It was at least 4 or 5 years ago. You and I connected over podcasting.
Way
absolutely.
Way before COVID. You were on a buddy of mine, Dennis Brown, who's a great LinkedIn influencer. And I'm at the gym and I was just listening I listen to Dennis every week. And I was just captivated by your story and just your humility and just your genius and your expertise. And you and I connected on LinkedIn, became fast friends. And so I thank you for joining us today. So you know what, Nicole, let's hit the question. Let's hit the question. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Ben, you ready? Are you sitting down, Ben? Are you ready?
I'm sitting down. I'm ready.
Let's hang on. Ben Baker, when you were a little guy growing up, you've had a wild career. You're a biker, bicyclist, not biker.
Oh, I was gonna say.
Yeah, bicyclist.
Well, I rode a bike.
Did you? Okay, so
I rode a bike. Yeah.
You're a little guy growing up. Who was your hero? You always talk about hero all the time. When you were a little guy growing up, who was your hero?
I think one of my biggest heroes growing up was probably my Uncle Sam. Now, Sam and Sheldon Allman were best friends of my parents. Mm-hmm. They were, uncle by choice. Now, Sheldon Allman, who here remembers the song George of the Jungle? George of the Jungle. Sheldon wrote that.
Oh wow!
Okay.
Wow.
You want to look up Sheldon's IMDb. He was in
kidding.
God knows how many Western movies, whatever. Sam and Sheldon were the original pitchmen. These were the dog and pony guys from the old country. These are the original. If you ever watched the movie Tin Men, that was Sam and Sheldon. Mm-hmm. And I learned from them at a young age how to take a stage, how to embrace an audience, how cadence and timing and listening and watching and understanding when you have an audience, when you don't have an audience, what's important, what's not important, how to bring people forward, how to bring people back in their seats. And I learned this from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, watching these people on stage and watching the things that they did. And I fell in love with it. And I fell in love with not the fact that they were, pitching. I mean, who here remembers Tommy Vu from the 1980s? You too can make $1 million, no money down. This is Tommy. These were the top 2 pitchmen for Tommy Vu. They sold more real estate seminars for Tommy than the next 20 guys combined. Yeah. And they knew how to work an audience, how to get people excited about something that they had no right to be excited about. And it was magical. And those were my heroes of my childhood, because they taught me what was possible.
Wow. Okay. That one's hard to top, Damon. That was a great hero combo right there. So Ben, thank you for sharing that. Again, guys, happy Monday. Thank you for joining us. Drop a note in the comment section. As a matter of fact, speaking of, I dropped Ben's book. So Ben, you and I connect on a podcast.
Yeah.
I immediately went out and bought your book. Fantastic book. Just really resonated. I just love the style, the short stories, true stories, and just it was extremely inspiring. I dropped that in the chat box. Dropped your website. We've got your brand marketing. You do podcast for hire. We have all sorts that we're going to dig into. Nicole, I know like you're just burning tons of questions, and you're coming fast and furious.
I'm
ready. Let's go.
Are you ready? Are you ready
I'm
for all
ready.
my
Let's go.
questions? Okay,
Here she
my
goes.
gosh. Okay. So my first question for you is, you've been doing podcasting for quite a while now. Like, you were one of the early adopters. What was it that kind of inspired you to want to go that route? What made you decide, I want to do this? What was the catalyst for you?
I think the catalyst for me was I was looking for some way to tell stories.
Oh, okay.
I've always been a storyteller. For 30 years, I've been a storyteller. For longer than 30 years, I've been a storyteller. And I was thinking about, okay, maybe I'll get on the radio. Maybe I'll become a disc jockey. And then I started realizing maybe I don't want to do this, because what I realized is that disc jockeys last 3 or 4 years within a city, and then they're gone. And then all of a sudden you're picking up and you're moving all over the country. And as a young single guy, that would have been great. With somebody with a 10-year-old child, just it wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted. And so I was looking for different ways of doing this. I said, okay, what can I do as a way to tell these stories and do this? And I've always loved podcasting. I've always loved listening to podcasts. I mean, there's people who have been podcasting for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why not me? And I started reaching out to some people that I knew that were in the podcasting game. I go, okay, what does it take to do this? Because I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want to be the person that does it 3 times, gives up, and walks away. By the way, that's about 90% of the podcasters in the world.
Yeah.
And I started talking to a bunch of people. They said, well, why don't you just come on our shows? Why don't you just come on our shows and let me show you how to do it? I can't teach you, but unless I show you.
That's a great way.
And I started going on show after show after show after show after show, and getting more comfortable at it, and realizing that there's a reason that you podcast. And the reason that your podcast is never about you. It's about your guest, and it's about your audience. And once I figured that out, that's when the magic happened. It was understanding that the show is about, how am I adding value into somebody's life? Who are the people that listen to me on a regular basis? Who are the people that that I'm trying to talk to, and talk to them specifically, and give them little tidbits of information that are going to make their lives better. And my show will grow, and it always did. And finding guests that add value to those people, and that's how I got into podcasting.
Beautiful.
Yeah. You can really tell too when you go on to podcasts, and it's, if it's too about promoting themselves, they're just some, you can listen to a couple episodes and realize, is that really something I want to do or not? And I think a lot of those people that do it for that reason, they probably flame out pretty quick. I don't look at the numbers or anything, because it's just not there. But when you get your heart into it, I think that's where you really see people be successful with it.
Oh, absolutely. I don't care if you're, a schlub like me or Barack Obama. If you don't care about your audience, your show's never going to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So your audience, when you first started, how's it changed? Is it the same as
the audience
it was?
has grown, but the premise of the show has always been I've always been a B2B guy.
Yeah.
I've always been business to business. I've always been about mid to large size organizations. That's who I talk to. That's who I've always talked to.
Yep.
You know, for 30 years, that's who I've always talked to. So that's my audience. My audience is mid-level leaders all the way up to senior management in B2B companies, in, you know, mid to large size companies, you know, all the way up to enterprise organizations. And it's all about sitting there going, what are the challenges that these people have on a regular basis that I can help them with?
Yeah.
You know, and that's what the last 325 episodes was about. That's what the Your Living Brand show is how do you communicate the value of your brand? And getting guests on the show that can sit there and say, this is what I do. This is what I've done differently. This is what worked. This is what failed. It's not just about the glory. It's about the failures. We learn as much, if not more, from the failures as we do from the successes.
I love that. That's so true. My gosh, man, this is so good. What do you think has been like? I have this list of questions, and I'm getting more questions in my head. So I'm just like ripping.
You just keep going. I'm here. I'm here.
So,
for, you know, I bought the steak. I'm in.
Yeah. What has been most surprising to you about podcasting that you weren't expecting? Like when you first started doing it over time, what have been like some of the surprises, the good and the bad surprises, maybe?
The biggest surprise is the community. It's amazing. There is a very large group of very successful podcasters that are very open to sharing.
Yeah.
That are very, you know, there are people that keep their, you know, their stuff tight, and that, you know, but those, as I said, those are the ones that I tend to be all about me and look how wonderful I am and look how marvelous I am. But the ones that truly want to be better, and the ones that truly sit there and say, I'm a good podcaster, I want to be a great podcaster, share. And we share guests, and we share ideas, and we share questions, and we share how we use cadence and inflection, and, you know, how to research. Because
that's a big one. How to research. I think that's really important. What tips or strategies do you have for podcasters who are, you know, for research, the research aspect of it? Because
I'm a big believer of research, don't over research. I'm a big believer of, you get people that sit there and they over research and then they start leading the conversation. Well, I read that in 1952 on a Tuesday at 2:00 in the afternoon, you blah, 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 blah. Blah. Hello, Mr. Tim Ferriss.
That is so interesting.
And it's just, I just sit there and go, let the guests tell their own story.
You know what's so interesting about that? So I am like totally a newbie to podcasting. I just recorded my 12th episode like a couple weeks ago. So
you made it a lot. You made it fast for people that do 3.
And I love it, man. And I love it just because I get to learn. Basically, I'm learning so much from these people. And but I remember I had a guest on my show recently, and at the end, I always ask for feedback. And so I said, well, you know, is there anything that I could, you know, that you have feedback for? And they said to me, I love that you let me answer the question and you didn't stop me, and you didn't have like kind of like this set, you know. He's like, sometimes I go into shows and they have like this script and they're just trying to get you to stay in the script, you know? And he said he loved that, you know, and so I think that's a really great point, is you just kind of have to know enough, but then also be willing to kind of just roll with it. Like Kurt and Damon do so well.
Sorry about that. I know the first question I'm going to ask somebody, and I know the last question I'm going to ask somebody.
Interesting.
And between that, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And I allow the guest to take me where they need to go.
Yeah.
And it's you know, you want to get certain information out of them. You know there's certain things that are important, but if you miss 1, 2, or 3 things, and you pick up 1 or 2 gems that you never even thought of, who cares?
Yeah. So true.
How about Ben? How about I'm sorry, Damon, you go ahead. I'll follow you.
So most memorable topic or conversation you've had?
Dude, you just took that's exactly what I was going to ask you.
I see.
I inadvertently asked one time, like, hey, I might have said, and I shouldn't have said this, like, you know, best guest, or I can't remember if it was on our show. And that sounds like you don't want to say like who's your best guest, but I like how you're saying it, Damon. Who's the most memorable or the most memorable conversation? So Ben,
I think probably the most memorable conversation I had had a lot of them, was with Dr. Ivan Meisner, who started BNI. And I think we had almost as great a conversation off air as we did on air.
So true.
And the conversation that happened before the mic turned on and the conversation that happened after the mic turned off was probably as enlightening and as generous as ever I've had in my life. And he was an extremely generous man, extremely interested, as interested about me as I was about him.
Love that.
I mean, this is the man who has 10,000 plus BNI chapters. This is the man who just sold BNI for $600 million.
Yeah.
Lives in this gorgeous house in Texas that he had just built with his wife. Unfortunately, his wife died during COVID, but just an absolutely gentleman of a man. And I think that it was those people that were as interested in me as I was in them that led to some of the greatest conversations that I had.
Here. I have to say, I had that same similar experience with Damon. I came on his show Faces of Business last fall, and I was having a really bad day that day. I had gotten some terrible news the night before, and I got up that morning. I was like, oh, I have to go on 2 shows today. I was like, oh, I'm like, I've got to put my game face on. And we had a great conversation on the show. It was wonderful. But the best part was after the show ended, Damon, the Zen master, was like dropping all these like wisdom bombs. And it was like everything I needed to hear that day.
Nice.
Like, Damon, I don't think you fully appreciate, but like after the show ended and we talked for like 30 minutes afterward, that was like a gift for me. I needed that day. And so I love everything you're saying, Ben. I think that's really cool that, and Damon, you have that same generous kind of spirit. You're the same. So that's cool. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Nicole. The founder of BNI, and how ironic, Damon, we were just in Alaska a month ago together, and we attended a BNI meeting in Anchorage, Alaska. How cool is that? Ben, how did you, let's go there for a minute, if you don't mind, Nicole.
Yeah.
Let's go, like, how did you find guests? Like, how did you find a guest of that stature? Like, go there for a little bit.
Okay, so let's talk about connecting the dots. My best guests over the years have been introduction from guests or from people that I know. I mean, you introduced me to Dory Clark, Kurt. I've had some phenomenal people on my thing that just sit there going, you need to get in touch with this person and have them on the show. There's a guy by the name of Cody Bateman that started to send out cards. And I happen to know somebody who is a major send out cards manufacturer. She introduced me to Cody. Cody was on my show, had a wonderful time. And Cody introduced me to Bob Berg, who started the Go Giver.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for some reason, I saw this picture of Cody Bateman, Bob Berg, and Ivan Meisner at an event together in Florida. And at the end of the event, Bob was really happy with the thing. He says, is there anything I can do for you? I says, well, I've done 2 halves of the triumvirate. Could you introduce me to Dr. Meisner? He says, give me 10 minutes.
Wow.
10 minutes later, his secretary is calling me saying, I hear we need, Dr. Meisner needs to be on your show. When do you want to set this thing up?
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally that quick.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, sometimes you just have to ask. I mean, Seth Godin was on my show because I asked Seth Godin to be on my show. And sometimes you just have to sit there and you have to ask, but you have to ask in a way that's going to be beneficial for them. You can't just say, I've got a podcast. Can you please come be on my podcast? I'd really like to have you as a guest. It's, you know what? I heard you talk about this topic. I thought it was really interesting. I'd like to attack it from this direction instead of that direction. I think that would be something that would be really interesting to the audience. What do you think? And would you be interested in being on the show to talk about that?
That's really cool.
And 9 out of 10 times, I'll either get a yes or, you know what? I'd really like to talk about this instead. Okay. Do you have 15 minutes so we can sit down and talk about that? So we can be prepared for it? Absolutely. And it's amazing, especially when you have people that are out on the lecture circuit, people that are trying to be in the public eye, people that are looking for content and they're looking for PR. If you can supply them with content that is going to be valuable for them and make them look good and make them feel important, they're willing to accommodate.
Yeah.
At least the good ones are.
Yeah. Yep.
Drop the mic.
So good. Nicole, do you need to explain about the strawberry rhubarb pie? Like, dude, that was strawberry rhubarb pie at its best right there, Ben.
I'm good.
Just
Just send a piece.
Totally. My Aunt Barb, she made the best strawberry rhubarb pie, and I'm just savoring it all right now.
We always say, like, when somebody just drops like a wisdom bomb like that, like that's just like Aunt Barb's strawberry rhubarb pie. So, dude, that was brilliant. Let's keep it rolling, Nicole.
Nice.
Yeah, I loved what you said there, how you ask and like the approach that you have to just saying, hey, what do you think about addressing this specific topic in this way? Man, I think that's brilliant advice. And it really shows respect to them and like thinking outside the box, right? Because, you know, some of these people, they get asked to be on like hundreds of podcasts.
They get asked to be on hundreds of podcasts.
And that's kind of like a really unique way to have like a unique spin on it. So that's really great.
Another thing, sorry, let me just add on to that, is that if you listen to a podcast and you really like the guest, reach out to the podcaster and say, listen, I just heard this person on your show. I really liked it. Is there any way you can make an introduction? Because I'd really like to talk to them about this.
Love that.
And make sure it's different from what their conversation was. You know, nobody wants to give the same interview 15,000 times.
So true. So true. I just had Marcus Sheridan on the podcast a couple weeks ago. He's like one of my idols. And he wrote this really great book, They Ask You Answer. And it was so interesting. I had all these questions ready to talk about that, but he didn't want to talk about that. He wanted to talk about his new book. And I was just like throwing it out. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just go with it. And he just started. And so I think that's like such great, you know, anyway, really great advice.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
And I like what you said a while ago too, Ben, about over preparing, because I think that's one of the things that you really need to do, is let the guest move the conversation as it goes.
And don't ignore a gem. If a guest says something, what did you mean by that? Hang on a second. We hadn't thought about that. Wait, so let's explore that for a second.
Yeah.
There's so many podcasters that have, as you said, have a list of 10 questions. And all I want to do is get through these 10 questions in my 32 and a half minutes. And sometimes going off script is the best thing you can do. Because all of a sudden you're going to get them talking about something that A, they're passionate about, B, they're really knowledgeable about, and it's going to add value that you never would have got by asking your original 10 questions.
So good. So, okay, I have a question for you about insourcing versus outsourcing podcasting.
Yes.
When do you recommend companies, I know you work with a lot of companies, like what would you recommend that they be asking themselves to know whether or not this is something they should be outsourcing or insourcing? You know, what are your
in
thoughts
terms
there?
of the technology, or in terms of
like the
host,
whole-
or in terms of everything?
Everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
talk about B2B, podcasts. Let's talk about corporate
Yeah.
podcasts. In personal podcasts, you're obviously going to want to be the guest on. You're going to want to be the host on your own show.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. In a company, the question is, who's got the chops to be the podcast, and who's got the time to be the podcaster? Because there's a lot of CEOs that I want to be the person on the mic. Well, this person travels 3 days a week. And all of a sudden you have a podcast that drops every 10 days, every 2 weeks, once every 3 months. And all of a sudden it becomes totally and absolutely ineffective because it's not dropping every Wednesday. If the biggest thing of a podcast is consistency. Consistency of product, consistency of quality, and consistency of time. And people want to see that consistent. They would say, oh, great, the new episode's coming out on Tuesday. Excellent. I'm waiting for it. Perfect. You know, I can load it up for my walk on Wednesday. I know it comes out on Tuesdays. Wednesday night I go for a walk. Great. I can listen to it on Wednesday night. But when you can't be that person that can sit there and say, hey, I can be that person who can be in front of the mic and assure that we have an episode every Wednesday, you're the wrong person to be on the podcast.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of companies have to look at that and sit there and say, do we hire somebody, you know, within the company that's their job, you know, or that's part of their job description, you know, that every week they have to make sure that an episode goes out on Wednesday, or do you hire somebody like our company that goes out there and becomes that professional host for you? And I think that you have to think about it and sit there and say, what do you want? What do you need? And what's your brand? You know, what is your brand? If you're a small company, having a third-party host your podcast is the wrong thing to do. If you're a multinational company, nobody's going to know if it's a hired person or if it's somebody within the organization. You know,
That's
because
a really good point.
you just build it to a point where it looks internal. But you need somebody who's knowledgeable. You need somebody who's interesting. You need somebody that can carry a conversation, who can communicate and who can listen. Somebody who's dynamic and somebody who's curious. And if you don't have somebody who's all of those things, they're not a good podcaster. And you need to sit there and then say, okay, is this going to be in front of a video or is this going to be audio? You know, I got a great face for audio. I really, truly do. You know, I'm not the prettiest person in the world. That's okay. I am who I am.
That's why he comes on stage with me. But Ben, I need to interject real quick.
Go ahead.
You are I know you're a humble guy and this might make you uncomfortable. You are such a dynamic speaker. And it's you know, I connected again. We go way back and just really connected right off the bat. Damon, you had your, you know, networking group, and Ben was a big part of that. And just Ben, we meet on a monthly, every other month basis. You're just such a compelling speaker. Like it's like you practice what you preach. You talk about the storytelling. Your LinkedIn posts, everything, your book, everything about you is like just dynamic, healthy communication. Has that been like intentional? Is that something like you've always worked on? Like how have you become such a, and again, I know you're humble. Please take it as a compliment. How have you become such a wonderful, great communicator?
You work your ass off. You truly do. I mean, you truly work your ass off.
Drop the mic right there, Nicole.
I love it, but when you say you work your ass off, what do you do to work? Like, what are you working your ass off doing?
I mean, let's start with my LinkedIn posts.
Okay.
The LinkedIn posts I write every single day. Every single day I post something. I write for 3 different magazines on a monthly basis. I write articles in LinkedIn. I communicate with clients. I'm constantly writing. And I'm constantly sitting there going, is there a better way to say this? Is there a more effective way to say this? Am I speaking to the right audience? Who am I writing this for? Why am I writing this? What do I want to achieve by this? And the same thing goes with all of my communication, is that, you know, when it comes to podcasting, I'm a far better podcaster 10 years later than I was 10 years ago. If you listen to some of my early episodes, they're embarrassing. They were the 10 questions. I am sure the first few episodes were 10 questions and you know, trying to get through them as quickly as I could in 32 and a half minutes. If you look at it and sit there and say, the more I listen, the more I talk to people, the more I interview more people, the more I listen to how they speak, the more I listen to how they communicate, the better off I become. It's something that takes days, weeks, months, years to perfect. It's not something, you know, that you're going to happen automatically. I look on stage and I have friends of mine, you know, part of the keynote speaking community that I'm part of, that dance circles around me. as good as I am, they're better. And as good as they are, there's people better than they are.
Mhm.
We're always achieving for better. We're not achieving to be like somebody else. We're achieving to be a better version of ourselves.
That's a moment of silence right there.
Yep.
Always achieving to be better. Always should, to be our better selves. I absolutely love that. All right. Hey, Nicole, let's get back on your 10 points. Your 10 questions.
I know. I'm totally embarrassed. I'm just going to throw this away.
You know
I
what?
feel
But
like
you know what? You're doing it in a
You know what?
natural way, and there's a conversation that's coming out of each one of them.
Yeah.
We're the
Yeah.
newbies, Nicole. We're the
Yeah.
newbies. So
I
there's
know.
no
Hey,
harm,
you
no
know what? I'm
Well, and
better than I was 10 episodes ago.
That's right. That's right. Look how much better you are.
I don't feel so bad now, Ben, when you said you have the first and last question, because literally I do research on the guests and things like that. But, really, if you go back and study the great interviewers and watch them, what they do, their preparation is thorough. Their preparation is poignant. It's ready. But the conversation that they have when they're there is really, you said this, getting that guest to talk to what they're passionate about. I can't even talk about it. But, and like you said, that first and last question just kind of gets you going into the move with them. And yeah. So it's just, it's great when you get these gems. And like you said, there's always going to be people better, but as yourself, and you're saying that, getting better is what you got to keep doing.
Absolutely.
I have a question for that. Like, how can you get, because I think I love it when I listen to podcasts or any shows, and you can tell that the guest just really feels so comfortable that they share some really intimate things, right? And how can you bring that, like, what are your recommendations on how you can bring that out in your guests so that they feel comfortable, confident to really go to some of those places where they can get like kind of below the surface and not, what are some things that you found to be successful, or maybe some examples of guests you've had where you've seen that happen and you've looked and said, well, man, how did this is, I don't know. Yeah.
3 things. I always have a 15-to-half-hour conversation with somebody a week, 2 weeks, 5 weeks ahead of the conversation.
Okay.
Just get to know the person. All I want to know is, who are you as an individual? Put them through the process, let them know about it, give them episodes of things that I've done. And the first thing I tell them is, look, your episode is not going to be live. If there's something that we say within the conversation that you're not comfortable with, let me know. We'll edit it.
Yeah.
If there's a place that you went and it says you talked about your stepmother and you said something about her that you really shouldn't have said, guess what? We can edit that out. And I've done that. We've had guests, not many, but we've had guests over the time where we've actually sat there and said, you know what? Do we really need to go there? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's cancel. Let's edit that out. And as long as it didn't detract from the overall conversation, I'm fine with that. Number 2 is the fact that I always have somebody on, sit there and talk to them 10 or 15 minutes before the mic goes live. Making sure their sound is good, making sure they're comfortable in front of the mic, making sure that they know what the process is, asking them if they have any questions, whatever, and just getting them comfortable. Just getting them comfortable, because nothing's worse than showing up at a podcast and you say, oh, when are we going live? And the person goes, oh, we've been live for 5 minutes. And I've had that happen to me. I've literally had somebody tell me, it says, well, when are we going live? It says, no, we've been live for like 5 minutes. I'm like, a warning shot over the bow would have been nice.
Yeah.
I never hit record until my guest is comfortable.
Yeah.
And number 3 is the conversation that happens after the podcast. Are you comfortable with everything that happened? Is there anything that you want to go back? Because I've had somebody say, oh God, I forgot to put that in. And I said, okay, let's sit there and jam for 5 minutes. And I added into the conversation. They say, oh, well, I really need to say this. Okay, let's just add another 5 minutes into the conversation. We'll edit it in somewhere.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Well, hey,
And it's just making people feel, is the more comfortable you can make people, the easier it is for them to have a really open and honest conversation.
Mhm.
so Ben, hey, we got a couple comments. So Duval says, hey, that's a great tip, Ben. We've got Inger, fellow Canadian. She's
Sure.
How you
Yay!
doing?
here. And so, hey, wow, Ben, loving this. And so, Ben, let's go. Nicole, if you're cool with this, let's go
Yeah.
here. Are we doing? We're doing good on time, right? How,
Mhm.
Ben? All right. So, we love our manufacturers. We love
Absolutely.
singing our songs to our manufacturers. Speaking of Ed Sheeran earlier. So, any tips, advice? Dude, this has just been a total masterclass on podcasting. This is fantastic. And Nicole, you are a dynamic, what a future Nicole has as a commentator, what an authority on communication. She's got her whole new microphone there. She's just,
Yeah, ready to go.
she's just crushing it. Nicole, we're just so proud. Man, I'm like, Uncle Kurt is just so proud right now. But Ben, let's go here. So for manufacturers that are just starting out, can we get into like maybe a little bit of a 101 on like, okay, hey, that's great for you guys that are marketers or you guys that are doing this, that, the other thing. I make widgets. I'm running a machine all day. I'm manufacturing. Could you go there a little bit? Like, let's give some insight on like, why should they absolutely be considering this as a viable, powerful source of communication in their world?
People want to know how the sausage is made.
Mhm.
There you go.
It's
There you
probably
go.
the easiest way of saying it.
Yes,
You know what? We might have to stop the program because I don't know if we can top that one right there. Right?
Yeah.
That was so good.
Sausage is
good.
great.
Yeah.
Mr. Baker, another mic drop, but please keep it going. That was fantastic.
You know what? Different companies podcast for different reasons.
Yeah.
Manufacturers podcast because they want to create content that give people quick and easy understanding of what they do, how they do it, why they do it, when they do it, and what they're doing. It's giving people a window into your company without having to have every single person walk through your door and have a walk around the place.
Oh, it's like
It's getting
scalable
people to
culture.
understand how you help make life easier.
Mhm.
The case studies that you can create through podcasting are incredible. By having guests on a show and talking about what was the problem that they had,
Mhm.
how did you figure it out together? What were the challenges that came up? What are the things that you need to do that made you unique and allowed you to be able to solve their problem that other people couldn't? What were the results? What did this widget end up being? Because you end up creating a widget, and this widget is a widget that might go into a Mercedes-Benz, or it might go into an aircraft, or it might go into God knows what, or a refrigerator.
Mhm.
And it's walking people through the process to sit there and say, from an extruded piece of metal to, how does this thing help an individual make their life better? And taking people through the process and saying we don't just turn a wrench. By turning a wrench, we make the world better.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. With smaller organizations, it's much easier for people to understand and feel that because they're part of building it. But as your business gets bigger, there's more of this disconnection from that greater purpose. And so I can see for manufacturers that maybe have grown to be mid-level or higher, that you're right, they need to be very intentional. The leadership needs to be very intentional about how they convey that purpose, that why of why they're in business, because that's what's going to keep the employees engaged and part so that they feel like what they're doing, that small, what they feel might be like insignificant, how it ties to that overall vision. Yeah. Super cool.
And it's also, it's also having that internal purpose. You're right. I mean, as we get bigger, as companies get bigger, we lose our purpose. We lose our culture. We lose our sense of where we're going and why we're going there. The podcast can enable you to get there because it's not just the podcast.
Yeah.
It's the conversations that happen on the shop floor because of the podcast. And the conversations happening in the training room because of the podcast. And the conversations happen in the health and safety seminars because of the podcast. And it's being able to drive that conversation throughout the organization and enabling everybody to not only know the story of the organization, but be able to internalize it, recall it, and retell it.
Internalize it, recall it, and retell it. So good.
Yeah. So do you see, you got me thinking about this, the eternal, because when you get in mid-sized, larger companies, do you see them creating podcasts internally it's for the internal people or potential employees more than customers, anybody outside? Yeah. It's really just telling about us and why we're here and why we do this.
It's a big part of our business.
Okay.
It's a big part of our business is internal podcasts, is creating these podcasts that are behind closed doors, that are private and secure, that are only accessible to employees. And what they do is they enable these organizations, especially organizations that are spread across time zones, continents, states, whatever, to be able to have a better understanding what's going on in the different plants, what's going on in the different divisions, what's going on in the different departments, and be able to sit there and say, okay, when I in procurement buy this, all this sheet metal, what happens to it? It goes from being this raw product that I buy from overseas. Okay, what happens to it along the way? And if I bought it this way instead I bought it this way, or had it shipped this way instead of shipped this way, maybe it would be more effective within the organization.
Yes, I could see how this could be hugely valuable in any sort of like change management situation,
Absolutely.
like digital transformation. You're investing in a new e-commerce project or mergers and acquisitions, and you've got like two teams that are trying to like figure out how they're going to work together. And I think that's something that a lot of times I've seen, like whenever I've been part of change management engagements, people always focus on the technical aspect of the project and the project management part of it, but they miss the people part. They miss like the internal adoption part of it. And I'm like thick in the middle of it right now with a client where we've like did this whole project and like, oh my gosh, we've got to figure out how we're going to get everyone to adopt this new platform and how are we going to train them on it and all those kinds of things, So I'd love to hear your perspective on how you've seen this being a vehicle for change management and how it's helping from that people perspective for these kinds of projects.
My comment is humans are the X factor. When we're leading through change, most organizations, as you're right, go straight to the technical. Okay, we need to move this ERP. There's this merger, there's this acquisition, whatever. It has to do with with the technology and moving the technology. But there's anywhere from 500 to 50,000 people that need to adopt this in order for it to be right. If you don't have people in your organization on board and rowing in the right direction and understand why they're rowing in the right direction and why rowing in that direction benefits them, they won't. And that's a challenge. I mean, we were working with an organization, and this didn't happen because there was a change in CEOs, but we had a company where they had just bought a company that had 8,000 employees. Now, this parent organization was 50,000. And think about it. You have 8,000 people that need to be indoctrinated into the new culture, into the new way of thinking, into the new sales process, into the new product lines, into all the different things that go along with it. And they were just going to take these people out of the office, put them through a 2-day cultural seminar, throw them back to the wolves, and away it goes. And it doesn't work.
Oh, man, yeah.
What we suggested was creating a podcast that talked about the merger for over a year. And invited different people within the organization onto the podcast to talk about what happened, what worked well, what wasn't working well, where the dynamics were and the cultural changes were between the old organization, the new organization, etc. It would have saved the company $20 million to do it our way.
Wow.
And would have been far more effective.
Yeah. Because that's so true. You need to hear that message over and over and over again for it to really sink in. We're human.
Yeah. And if
we're not, we're like goldfish.
And think about it. Every employee is going to cost you roughly about $100,000 to replace. If you get people that walk out the door, on average, some less, some more. Executives are about 213% of their annual salary to replace. So let's call it $100,000 on average. If 20% of those 8,000 people walked out the door, that's $15 million.
Sheesh, yeah.
Plus all the intellectual capital that goes along with it.
Yeah. Which
Yeah,
is, sheesh,
that
how
could
do
be
you put a price
billions.
on that? Like,
Yep.
you're absolutely
Yep.
right. Wow. Drop the mic again. How many is this now?
I don't know. We've broken 3
I've
mics so
lost
far.
count.
Yeah.
It's just when Ben Baker's in the
That's-
house, man, it's way too many.
It's a great point, though. It's a great point. Is in in a situation like that, this kind of communication ahead, during, after these kind of changes is how you can make them successful. Where it could just fail,
Yeah.
just plain fail.
Well, Damon, how many mergers and acquisitions fail because
Yeah.
people don't focus on the people?
Yeah, vast majority.
Mhm.
Vast majority. If they fail, it's because they didn't consider the culture and mixing them together right.
Why do you think that happens over and over again?
Because the
Why
people
is
doing
it?
it are technical.
Yeah.
The people doing the deals are technical, right? Either they're
Lawyers,
financial, they're off.
accountants,
Yeah,
financial analysts, all
Yeah.
those type of people.
Numbers, right?
Yep. Makes sense on paper.
It makes sense on paper. So, all right, Ben, we're going to start winding down here, man. Oh my God, this is pure gold. I absolutely love that from a bigger. How about, what if we go here, Ben? I'm a 20, 30, 40, 50 person manufacturer.
Sure.
Still should consider podcasting. Can we talk to the small entrepreneur, small manufacturer? Why should they be considering podcasting?
I think the small to mid-sized, up to the 50-person company should look at a podcast because it helps them build social media content to be able to continue to tell their story. A podcast is just the first kick of the can. Here's for example, we're going to have 60 minutes worth of material on the show. We videotaped it. How many different sub-conversations do we have? We could have 10 5-minute videos within this thing that we could, and then be able to put those out over 6 months. Yeah. We could have audiograms. We could have, memes. We could have short blog posts. There's all sorts of things that can come out of a podcast episode. The podcast itself is just long form content that enables you to create short-term content. Listen, for example, my second book, Leading Beyond a Crisis, A Conversation About What's Next, is a compilation of 16 different podcast interviews. We just did 16 different interviews. We compiled them, we edited them down, and we turned it into a book during COVID.
Very cool.
So all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of thought leadership authority.
Yeah. It's great marketing, repurposing, man. Getting scrappy.
Got to scrape the bottom of the barrel. There's amazing things at the bottom of the barrel.
Nicole, do you have any rapid fire questions left for our friend Ben?
Oh, rapid. Okay. What's your spirit animal?
Eagle.
Eagle Kurt. He's an eagle like you.
I am an eagle.
Tell me why.
He's got way too much hair, though. I don't know what Ben's thinking. He has way too much hair.
Why are you an eagle, Ben Baker?
To me, it's the elegance of being able to soar high and be able to see everything from up high.
You are great at that. You've got that.
It's being able to see the whole picture from the top looking down.
And people need that eagle, man. You're doing great work. Okay. Next question. What's your favorite book?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of great books out there. How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Good one.
Classic.
My last podcast guest said the same book.
Yeah.
It's a classic. Well,
it is.
Now I want to digress one second.
Yeah, do it.
And I tell you, your book had powerful personal brands, if I have that correct, right?
Yeah.
And I dropped the link, and you guys, you can buy it on Amazon. It is just it's a great read. It's a quick read, great stories. Just share, and I know it's been a few years now since you wrote that. Just share the insight of that book and
sure. That book came out in 2018. And what was happening at the time is I was doing some volunteering at one of the universities, teaching 3rd and 4th year business students how to network and how to communicate more effectively, how to interview, that type of stuff. Smart kids couldn't communicate their value to save their life. They're all sitting there going, well, I got this grade in this course. I'm like, nobody cares. And they would just look at me and terrified.
Yeah.
And I'm going, nobody cares the grades you got. It says, do you know what you call the person who graduates last in medical school? Doctor.
Doctor. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love
Now,
So true.
Yeah.
they are still a doctor.
Yeah.
I says, what we want to find out is, what did you learn?
Yeah.
And I started
true.
looking for a book on how to teach these people how to communicate more effectively. I couldn't find one. So I wrote one.
You wrote one.
And it's
Mhm.
stories from my life. It's lessons that I learned. At the end of every chapter, I ask a question, and I have 3 pages of lined print for people to put their own answers in there.
Mhm.
And it's really designed for people to think on their own, to sit there and say, there is no right answer.
Yeah.
What is your right answer?
What's your right? Yeah.
What is
That's-
your right answer?
That's so good. And that's one story,
Yeah.
and I hope I don't butcher this. There was a gentleman that was in real estate in the state of Wisconsin, maybe Milwaukee. Do you remember this story, Ben, in your book?
Okay.
And what I love, so what Damon, what you and I talk about all the time is like, how do you niche down till it hurts, niche down till it hurts. And if I recall correctly, this gentleman, young, and I can't remember his story, situation, ended up in real estate. And what he did is like, he just kept niching down, where like he gave me the best realtor, like on his street, in his area, you know, like, and maybe started going to his BNI group, and then like started expanding from there and built a really nice business by really going super, super niche. And what I love is like, you would tell a story about yourself or your life, you know, from when you're a young man, or, you know, like growing up with your dad and his friends, you would share, you know, some of those stories. Then you would give examples of entrepreneurs and leadership examples. And it's just such a great flowing book. So again, guys, I dropped it in the chat. I strongly welcome anybody to grab Ben's book. You will thank me later. Nicole, what else do you have on your rapid fire list?
Rapid fire. If you were a spy, what would your code name be, Ben?
Blackwater.
Ooh. What is it?
Blackwater.
Blackwater. All right. All right. You've thought about this one. Someone's asked you this before. Okay. If you had to guess, what is one thing people would say they most appreciate about you in one word?
Reliability.
Ah, all right. Okay. Do you have a business coach?
At the moment, not officially, but I have people that I lead on.
Okay. What's your thoughts on AI in one word?
Wow.
Can I use 2 words?
Sure.
Getting there.
Getting there. Okay. All right. I think that's true. And you already answered what's the topic for your next book. So, and you already answered who's your hero. So those are my rapid fire. Oh, last one.
Boom.
One
Boom.
subject you'd like to learn more about right now.
Probably more about the human psyche.
Oh,
So Ben, you close out your podcast always with how do you want people to think of you when you leave the room? Do I have that close? Right. All right.
When you leave a meeting and you get in your car, what's the one thing you want people to think about when you're not in the room?
What's your answer?
I want people to think about how I changed their life, about how I made them think differently, and how I made them look at the world from multiple angles, and not just the one that they've been comfortable with their entire lives.
So good.
well, that's definitely true about you. You absolutely, I mean, you live that. So well done, you.
Well done, you. So, all right. I know we're coming in the bottom of the hour, so we will start winding down. Damon, words of wisdom, thoughts, any last parting thoughts for our friend?
I'm just soaking it in, man. Just soaking it in. This is awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Hey, my pleasure, Damon. I love the fact that we all got together finally. It's been way too long, and it's, you know, I've loved you all for so long, and it's great being with all you at the same time.
Well, tons of love right back at you.
Yeah.
Nicole, any words of wisdom, parting thoughts, last words for Ben?
Oh, last words for Ben. Oh, geez. I mean, I'm just like Damon, soaking it all in. And I think my last words for you is just, I appreciate you. I appreciate how you show up on LinkedIn for me and for your community. And I appreciate how you support, you know, everyone, and how you're always, like you mentioned before, that what, you know, people would say that you're reliable. And you show up for people, and I've seen that and I appreciate that. So it's nice to be part of your community and to be able to savor the flavor of Ben Baker's brilliance. And I think I love that you have this really great bird's eye view of things and perspectives. And there's so many companies that really need that. And I think that what you're offering is really tremendous value for all of those mid-level and enterprise businesses and manufacturers that are going through all of them are going through change management. So there's not one company that isn't. Change is a given. So
change is the only constant.
It's the only constant in business.
The only constant, and people hate change. That's the only two.
Yes, they do.
Exactly.
They hate it, but they have to live with it every day. It's like, come on, have you just accepted that this is part of life?
So let me just give everybody a free gift before I leave. If you go to yourbrandmarketing.com/ebooks, there's several ebooks there, some on podcasting, some on change management, some on communication, and they're all free. There's no paywall. Just grab them. They're PDFs, and just use them at your will.
Thank you.
Okay. I just grabbed your website. I'm going to drop that in the comment section right here and drop that in there. And Ben, I want to close out and first off, thank you. And again, the one word I think of with Ben, when you leave the room, my friend, and again, this was really uncommon because I was connected. I'm at the gym. I'm listening to you on my buddy's podcast. I listened to tons of his podcasts, other podcasts, and I just resonated with your story. Your integrity is the word that I think of. Just a man of just high integrity. You and I connected, and Nicole, you know what I did? Ben and I hadn't even spoke yet. I wrote a blog post about Ben. Do you remember that, Ben?
Yeah, you're my one-man PR community.
I am
you know what, Kurt, that is a gift he has.
He is the one-man PR community.
I wrote up I just started blogging. I was working on my book, and I wrote a blog about Ben Baker, and it's still out on the World Wide Web there somewhere. It's on my website. It's on B2Btail. Ben, you probably have it. You probably on your mom's refrigerator somewhere. And, and you drop so many great value bombs. And again, like reading your book, and Damon, you and I preached about this a lot when we were in Alaska, understanding your customer's customer. Yeah. And you know where I got that from? I got that from my friend Ben. And so, Ben, I want to thank you for your brilliance, your wisdom, and thank you for your friendship. Appreciate your support and just everything that you do. So, hey, how about a big round of applause for Ben Baker?
Ben Baker.
And thank you all for being such an amazing group. And you know what? Whatever I can help companies with consulting, with communication, with change management, it's all about communication, and it's all about understanding where you are first, where you're going, and building a bridge. There is no cookie cutter approach. There is no box. It's finding out what works best for you.
That's right. So, hey, check out Ben. Go to Ben's LinkedIn profile, Your Brand Marketing Podcast for Hire. And just, boy, if you're coming into this late, go back and hit rewind and just catch all these golden nuggets all over again. So we will close out. So now, Damon, man, we're not here on Friday. We're taking a little holiday break. We do have now. We're flipping a script tomorrow on Faces of Business. Are we not? I think there's a rumor.
I don't know about this.
We're flipping the script. So, man, if you're a Faces of Business fan, you get Nicole and I have, man, we're putting Damon on the hot seat. Damon's going to be the guest tomorrow on his very own show, Faces of Business. And so we will see you tomorrow, 6:00 Eastern, 3:00 Pacific. Can't wait for that. Guys, have an amazing, incredible week. God bless you. And just like Ben Baker, man, just be someone's inspiration, and we'll all have a great day. So it's that easy. So, all right, guys. Thank you.